Well,
The
thanks for
kindergarten buddies.
joining us.
That's it, that's
All
it.
right, let's call the meeting to order and we'll get started. So you can do your thing and you can go on your way, and then we'll discuss some of the things that we've been doing. Sound like a plan?
Sounds great.
Good. So Ann Merrick is here.
Ruth Lower.
Paul McComb.
Bruce Button.
Claude Cicchetti.
Great. And we have the reading of the approval of the minutes. I found a couple of typos, Claude, but other than that, it was fine.
That's great. You fixed them on the draft that you sent to everyone, or are they still typos in this draft?
They were still typos in the draft. It was
Okay.
under public comments, and there were two that's or something like that somewhere. Yeah.
Do you want me to take a look and update it for the final?
I'll make the change and send it to Claude.
Okay. Okay. That way I'll have it for records, then I'll send it back to you and Ruth.
Great,
And then I will post. Okay,
Okay.
great.
sounds good. Thank you.
Other than that, are there any other corrections?
I would
or-
move approval of the minutes.
Okay,
Second.
any more discussion needed? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Bruce?
Bruce,
Aye, I'm sorry.
thank you.
I'm napping.
So with that, I'll introduce Mary, who I have never met in person. But look forward to doing that someday. Who is at the Edward Collins Center for Public Management, which is part of the John W. McCormick Graduate School of Public Policy at the University of Massachusetts. And we already know a personal thing about you. Maybe you could just say something in terms of introducing yourself.
Sure, I'm happy to help you today. As stated, my name is Mary Icardi. I've been in the Massachusetts municipal HR world for just about 30 years. Amy was one of my first people I met through the then MMPA. We're part of the old crew, I guess, or long-serving crew. And my whole background has been municipal HR and labor relations. I lead the HR practice for the Collins Center for Public Management. I've been that for 12 years now. Prior to that, I was fortunate to be home with my kids for a few years. The job I was able to quit to be home with 3 kids was the HR director for the town of Watertown. I was there for 8.5 years. Prior to that, I was in the town of Barnstable on Cape Cod. Before that, Wellesley for a short time. I think it was either Wellesley or the Cape that I met around 1990. And before that, I was with the Massachusetts Department of Public Works. And I'm dating myself because it hasn't been the Mass DPW 1990 when Governor Weld was elected. So I'm a UMass grad, Amherst undergraduate and graduate school. I live in Shrewsbury, not too far away. I love what I do, have a passion for what I do, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I think the agenda item is around the issue of a survey. And I'm happy to talk with you about the pros and cons of that. I did look at the materials of a PowerPoint, and I can share some thoughts on that if you'd like, but really, I would want to, in order to discuss a survey, the most important thing is, what is your goal in doing a survey? And what is the deliverable that you're looking for? So I really want to hear from you, not from me. Anybody can put together a survey, whether you're using Qualtrics, a survey form, a Google form, a Survey Monkey, any of those things. It really is, it's formulating the questions to develop what it is you're trying to figure out. And that's a little bit nebulous to me, so I'm not quite sure what you're looking for.
Does anybody have anything specific? The thing that I think we are all looking for is, in general, the input of employees to what's going on in the personnel realm in the town, and looking toward the future. Am I
Well,
well?
I guess I would push back with a little bit of a question in that when you say in the personnel realm, I think when you and I spoke, I talked about a survey we did for the city of Marlborough. And that was all around succession planning and what training people were looking for and what tools they needed to do their job. It
Yep.
was very much related to what training they need.
That certainly would be a big piece of it.
And so an employee survey of the personnel realm, I think that
It's around development.
are we talking about how is the HR department doing for employees? When I see your slides, I see things about an ombudsperson. Are
Well,
you
those slides are not for our discussion tonight, right now.
okay?
Those have not been submitted they're not agreements that have been made by anybody on the task force.
Okay,
That's what-
so
it was
that,
a draft is a draft agreement, a
Okay.
draft presentation.
sure. So I guess my question is, are we trying to, is it an employee satisfaction survey? Is it a, what do we wish our town to look like? Is it a, what do we need to be more successful for employees? That's the kind of thing I'm looking for, because if we're not clear on that, data collected is junk if it's not, you know.
Well, I think it's along the lines of how do we keep the people we have? How do we make them feel like they're valued? As
And-
well.
Are we surveying to see if they're valued, or do we know they're not feeling valued and we're asking why?
Paul, go ahead.
This wasn't where I was going to interject this, but it may help Mary a little bit.
Okay.
With respect to the scope of the survey, there's our part of the role of the personnel board, how it interfaces with employees, how things are presented to the personnel board. Should they be part of, presently, they're actually a step in the grievance process. If that's inappropriate, then, that's something to look at, maybe so that's a direct employee input into what the present role is now. So I guess I foresee some questions that come right off of the present structure. Does that seem like it's appropriate? Further questions, and the hitch I'll throw into this at this point is, I don't mean it as a hitch. In meeting with Carrie LaFleur last week, she would like to partner with us on a survey. So it would be partly the town doing questions that they would like to ask, and more specifically, questions that are more directly related to our role. So it's a dual purpose. So I don't think any of us can speak to the exact questions of how it would be laid out with respect to the Carrie and the town part of it. And then there would be our part of it relating to the personnel board.
Paul, can you characterize what her goal would be?
I'm going to generally say that I felt it would lean towards an employee satisfaction survey with a climate. During our conversation, we talked about something I had found online, and I don't know if I mentioned it in a prior meeting. It obviously doesn't relate to the town operations, but it's the federal government. The federal government uses it. It's an employee climate
Yeah.
survey, and So, some, if you take the word commander out of it and put supervisor or, move some of the pieces around, I think is, that's the general sense I got, that it would be a tool that would be helpful to her in her new role, and it would be kill two birds with one stone. Like, that's the way I took it.
If I may interject here,
Yeah.
to Mary's original question, the charge or job description, if you're not a townie, the charge asks us to check in with certain stakeholders, and those stakeholders tend to be elected officials and department heads, the leadership team, as we call it. My view of the survey of employees was to give me a snapshot of the employee view of the current situation. We don't have a current problem, but we have a situation. I would like to check in with employees on their views, and then until the survey gets to be 40 or 50 questions long, I'd like to second the climate and the satisfaction piece, as our job also entails making a recommendation at the end of our study to the select board.
Text Tom, okay.
Okay,
Uh,
I'll send this.
Sorry. I'm hearing voices, and I don't think they're in my head. Somebody needs to mute. Okay. I think we may need to think of surveying more than one time, but we need to gather information from all sides of the question. We can't simply ask the Board of Selectmen or different department heads, what do you think? Because they're not the whole part, they're not the entire equation. And I appreciate, Paul, your work that you're doing and reaching out to the town manager. It will be very effective.
I'm very curious to hear Mary's take on, I know this is just a simple part of mechanics, but on surveys that have been done, do you have a feeling on the length of the surveys? I've had a couple of people say to me, don't make them too long, or it can get, keep them as a multiple choice or a yes or no answer, not an opinion. I think that'd be the way I'm leaning, is not an opinion. And this would be anonymous as well. And your take on that.
Could I jump in as well, just to perhaps give a slightly different perspective? I think, surveys, more information is always better than less information. So I'm, obviously not against a survey, but I wonder if it might be premature, especially if the survey is potentially expanding to include the town, and something more that we're not tasked to do, but perhaps the town manager is interested in doing. It seems to me that we may have identified ways to perhaps change or improve the governance, and that's clearly our mission. Our charge is to look at the governance of what's decided by personnel board, what's decided by town meeting. Are there any suggested changes to the way the personnel board works? But then it's a whole different thing to say, looking at things like employee satisfaction. To me, that sounds less like our charge and more the charge of the personnel board itself. So while I'm not against the survey, I think we actually have bigger issues to solve first, deciding what the personnel board should be doing. And then perhaps it's not even for us, but for the personnel board to do a survey, once it's decided what the changes to the personnel board are that we suggest. Again, just a different opinion.
Thank you.
All right, you ready for me? Okay, I agree with all of you. So, um, I actually agree with Paul, and if you go by William, that's why the questions I asked, it's a little muddy. It's a little muddy. Employee, you've got your structure of, you've got a town manager, an HR department, you've got a personnel board. I remember meeting a while ago with a few personnel board members, trying to look at the issue of the role of the personnel board. More and more we recommend, and I believe I had sent some sample reports, quite frankly, to reduce the authority of personnel boards only because of the highly sensitive and liability issues with personnel and having volunteer boards be involved in personnel matters, even in grievance steps. So that's one piece of it to think of. I think of the employee satisfaction piece. I think the recommendation to have that be the personnel board's task is a good one. I think the idea of a climate, sometimes we do a climate investigation, and sometimes climate has a negative connotation to it, meaning that, oh, we have to check the climate of something. I don't necessarily hear you're saying the climate is bad, but there's clearly an underlying in this conversation that there's concern from the employee opinion or perspective issue, and I think it's valuable to give voice to that. I do think that you're in certainly a transition phase in terms of town manager, and what makes the most sense about the timing of any survey. I know you had a long-serving town manager, and then a short-serving town manager, and now you have an interim town manager. What is the best time to look forward and to get that information? You're also coming off of 2 years of COVID, town manager transition. How accurate is your survey going to be? Particularly if you're asking, employees will always tell you the negative, and they may not tell you the positive. And you have to frame the questions in the right way. I think you can do many multiple choice. When you do a survey, it's all how you frame the question. If you have multiple choice questions, it's easier to, analyze the data. The downside to only having multiple choice, people, their opinions are really being heard, that you want to give some opportunity for some narrative, for some short answers, so there's all different mechanisms to a survey. I think the most important thing is to really pin down the right timing. The goal of the survey is, I think an employee survey, I don't even think you need to say it's climate or satisfaction, because I'm not sure either one of those words. And there was somebody who said, and I don't remember who said it, was the current situation. To me, as an HR professional, when somebody says we have a current situation, that means there's an underlying concern or problem. And we really need to be sure that we're all talking about the same thing when we say we want to evaluate the current situation. Is it the environment? I don't know enough about your town. Is there a perception that there is employee dissatisfaction? We've been through a lot of turmoil lately. So it may not be the best time to do that. So I'm happy to hear more what people have to say, and we go on from there. Those are my two initial steps.
Ruth, do you have your hand up?
Oh, yes, I do. I'm sorry. Mary, I didn't know that you've already consulted with the personnel board, as you just mentioned. What was your topic and what was the outcome?
It was just an initial conversation years ago about their structure and their role, but we never ended up doing a project. It was initial. I forget. Is there an Ellen? Was it Ellen? Amy might know who I met with.
Yes, Ellen. Yes.
That's who it was.
Okay.
Bruce, did you?
What question for Mary? What types of specific surveys have you done? Can you give us some examples of what you've done in the past and what the success has been, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. I mean, me personally in HR surveys, only done a few. We've done the city of Marlborough, as I said. We've done an awful lot of surveys around HR roles, but less so on employee feedback. My experience is more anecdotal in interviewing employees when in fact there are issues, and we do a climate assessment. Why I come from when you say climate, those are interviews with people to really dive into an issue that there may be in an organization. But in terms of employee satisfaction, just a handful. And they're as good as the questions that you ask. In terms of how many questions, I wouldn't say 50, but I wouldn't say just 10 either. I think that you can get at it. I think that if the town manager is looking to do a survey with you, and whether you use the Collins Center or somebody else, or do it yourself, quite frankly, you can create, a group survey. And I think doing one survey for 2 issues is probably smart, so that you're not asking contradictory questions. For example, if the town manager had one question, this group had another, or the personnel had another, and they were similar, would you come up with different information? So I do think the coordinated approach would be the way to go.
And Mary, the wonderful reports that you sent us, my assumption was you didn't use any surveys for either of those towns.
Correct.
Okay.
Could I,
Yes,
I'm
go ahead,
sorry
Ruth.
to keep it going here, but it seems that Mary is telling us that a survey might not be the right thing to do here. And so I want to ask how she would approach getting input from all members of the community if we are definitely directed to check in with stakeholders. And the people that we've talked with have been department heads, leadership team. Somebody did the moderator, somebody did the town, I think town manager, and so forth. We did that on a conversational basis. How could we approach employees, get their picture as well? With, I don't think we set forward with the stakeholders, shall we continue to call them, with deciding whether we wanted to hear from them regarding the climate, or whether we wanted to hear from them regarding a problem or satisfaction. So, I'd like to make sure we don't skip half of the equation. How can we do it if not a survey?
I think that I'm not necessarily saying not to do a survey, because when you have that many, it's hard to do the individual meeting. So I did happen to see the draft minutes, I think, that were attached here. And I can see from your individual stakeholder meetings that you had met with people. And one of them said, I had previously sent somebody the questions we used as a guide for our discussion. So it's clear, although I haven't seen them, you all developed a set of questions that were guiding your stakeholder interviews. I would say, I don't know what they are, but framing your input, I would presume you're looking for the same things from your survey.
Yep.
Okay, so seeing those questions would help formulate a survey. And sometimes it doesn't exactly translate to employees versus department heads. If again, having not seen the not having seen the questions. Oh, I see. Is the first question, how does the select board interact with the personnel board?
Yeah,
No,
well, it was for Ruth, yes.
okay. So again, framing what it is you're looking for is, I do think an employee survey at the right time, and whether you feel it is better with the town manager or separate from, trying to get, if you had a set of questions that you gave to your stakeholders, I would think you would ask the employees those same things. And I think that the reason you could, what we see an awful lot of, more so than surveys, which is something we use more of, is doing small group meetings with groups of employees.
From the same department?
A small group, we're doing 5 public forums for any employee who wants to attend, and again, what that gets at, and I know you talked about, but if you can't put your name on something, we're not a fan of anonymous surveys. Because I see why some people would want anonymous, because they've got this fear somehow of retribution. But what are we really afraid of? I think that there's no need to be anonymous. And because there's avenues, you have a town manager, you have a professional HR department. I'm not sure the need for anonymous unless you're telling me there's a major concern. And if there's concern, an employee survey is not the way to find out. There are avenues. So there's a risk there. There's a liability. What do you do with an anonymous statement that I'm being harassed by my boss and you don't know who that is? It's really risky to have anonymity and promise confidentiality, and there's issues around HR. So that is a big concern. I would rather offer people to complete a survey. If it's an opinion survey, that's fine. I like it to be more positive than negative of what do you need to be successful in your job. Wonderful questions to ask. Not what's your problem with the HR department, the town manager, the finance director, or your boss, which is also why the fear of personnel boards being involved in day-to-day, grievances. I can't tell you how many personnel boards I've advised to say, don't take that sexual harassment claim. That needs to be, you should not be doing that. You have professional staff to do that. So I really think it's about framing the input you're looking for. If you're looking, and I don't know enough of the work that you're doing, quite frankly, to know what it is you're looking to get from, which is why I'm asking.
I'm sorry.
15 minutes outside.
Okay.
How you feeling?
Sore.
Sure.
I think that's William. Okay.
Yeah, William, you need to mute.
Sleep, right?
Unless you're speaking. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Mary?
So my recommendation would be have a chat with the town manager, see really what it is. I think you need to tease out what you're looking for. A survey to say, what do you like and what do you don't like isn't helpful. I think that if you say, let me give you an example of some of the questions we asked on our most recent survey of Marlboro. What tools do you need? How often do you receive direction and feedback from your supervisor? That's getting at how closely are you managed? Are you getting the support from your manager? And again, I know everything would be positive for Amy, but one of the questions was, if you had a magic wand, what would you change about the HR department? The favorite question was, if you were there for a day, what would you do? Those were the best answers. But I do think you can get at some of what you're talking about without it being over the top. My concern is you've got 2 things going on here. You've got your task force and the role of the person on the board and the role of the town manager, which is interim, and the juxtaposition to a professional HR department. So you've got a lot of variables here, and I just want you to whatever you end up doing, be clear going in of, what lane we're in.
Yeah.
And I do know that you've got a strong town manager, form of government.
It's not going to change, I don't think.
Okay. So I just think keep that in mind as you look forward. And I think that if the town manager is interim town manager is looking to do a survey, maybe you can dovetail it because it might be useful for everybody. So
That's a really interesting point. To get back to our role as a task force, which is really about governance, a lot of the questions you're talking about seem appropriate for HR to ask, or the town manager to ask, or the personnel board to ask. But we're tasked about what the role of the personnel board is. What types of questions, if any, might you suggest that would get at our specific mandate, as opposed to something that's much broader than our mandate?
to ask an employee what they want of an advisory board to the town meeting and town manager, I'm not sure how many questions I could come up with. Because I'm not sure it's an employee's role to decide that issue. I think you can ask, what do you like about the personnel board? What do you don't like? But really, I'm not sure that that's germane, which is why I was asking you questions about what is the purpose of the survey. The governance structure is set in your bylaws. And if you're looking to change the role of the personnel board, I will tell you more often than not, it's removing the personnel board from the HR process in terms of the day-to-day employee relations. Most personnel boards are about the classification system. What are our job descriptions, advising on policies. More and more lawyers are going to tell you, get out of the grievance procedure, get out of anything that's confidential. You're in public meetings. Even somebody being on an agenda could impact them, could harm them publicly. So it really is, you have a confidential HR department. You have an employee, I believe you have an employees assistance program. So
Please.
no, you don't? You laugh?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Okay. It
We
may
do.
not be good, but again, those are things, maybe your role is to look for a new employees assistance program,
Oh,
so those are the things. I'm not sure in an employee survey, asking them what they want out of a personnel board, I'm not sure how that's going to inform structurally, governance wise, what you do.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is there anybody that's not on the task force who wants to ask Mary a question before we thank her for her expertise and checking in with us? Lot to think about. Susan.
I see Susan.
Hi, yes, Mary, thank you. So if I could try to recap what your most recent comments, it would probably be a good idea for the task force to look at the bylaw and see what belongs where in order to figure out where to go with the personnel board.
I agree. And I also think one of the things that sometimes gets lost is I would add, and I'm not trying to spend the town's money, before you go down any big road, I would ask for your labor employment council's advice on what things should be in the personnel board and what things should not. My experience is more and more, they're really removing employee issues that could be confidential or a liability or performance or discipline away from personnel boards, and having personnel boards be the advisory on job descriptions, on classification structures, and policy.
And Mary, do you have any sort of state-of-the-art examples of that?
Of a lawyer's opinion? No.
No, of a personnel board's responsibilities along those lines.
Oh, let me check. let me check, and if I can get my hands on some, I will send them to you, Ann. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we had talked about early on was, what is out there that is already, a good example
Sure.
of best practices, because that's what we want to shoot for, is best practices.
Mhm.
Yeah, either that, or, and I don't want to speak for Amy because she doesn't have enough work to do. There is the MMHR listserv where she could request that information from fellow HR directors. So that might be the quickest way to get something like that.
Mhm.
You could get some samples that way.
Yeah, because I did go to the MMHR website, and there was an incredible workshop that was put on that was talking about the future of work. Those who had to interact with citizens and those who did not.
Mhm.
And it got into a whole new way of thinking about employment. And it also talked about working from home.
I'm all for that.
Yeah.
You can see them in my home. All right. Well, thank you so much for inviting me in, and I will check on a few of those, but I think with the MMHR listserv that goes to all the HR directors, you might be better served getting some of those sample
Right.
bylaws, but please reach out again if you have any follow-up, and
Thank you for sending us the 2 write-ups that you did send us. It was
Oh,
wonderful.
they were
Alright.
very valuable, very
Yeah.
valuable.
great. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
A lot to think about. So, we had asked everybody who had a chance to write up some stuff to get it in before the Thursday deadline. And should we move to some of the interviews that we've done?
Sure. Knowing that those interviews need to be ongoing.
Yeah.
So you're up first.
Well, I've talked with all the folks that are on the personnel board, and I kept it very short and sweet. And I did have a chance to ask each of them to look over my aggregate report to see whether they recognize themselves in there. And I think the thing that is most striking, as Mary said, is that other than compensation, they really don't have much of a role to play at this time. So they all feel kind of like they're a rubber stamp. And you can read the rest. If you have any questions, let me know. And I see Bill's on too, so he might chime in.
How about Bruce?
I met with Chief O'Connor and Captain Mulcahy. We talked about a whole bunch of stuff, and we're going to chat again. It seems one of the biggest problems that I came out of it is they've got a bunch of openings and they can't seem to fill them, and they've had a lot of turnover for whatever reasons. And I talked with a new librarian Friday morning, and she's off and running. I think she'll do a good job. She's got a similar issue in that she's got, some positions she can't seem to fill. So, and that's about it. We agreed to chat again a week or two after she's been there a little longer. But on balance, there's a lot of work to be done, I think, at some point. Next.
Okay, how about Claude was working on citizens and bylaws?
Hi, thanks. Sure, let me start with citizens. I focused on the citizens who we've been very happy that have been joining us and taking the time. But I have to say, I used it very much for my own personal benefit in order to really be brought up to speed. So not really that much to report. Not having been too familiar with the issues, which I suppose had its good and its bad part until we started this process when I was first appointed. I really focused on, what had happened historically, what some of the issues were, what went on in town meeting. And since these were, all folks who've been in positions that gave them a lot of information, it was really helpful, even to find information, like the charge back to 1985, previous town meeting proposals, not just the most recent ones, but earlier ones. And so it was really very helpful to me to have a much broader and more complete picture of our task, and it's given me more insight into that. As far as the bylaw itself, so I was looking at the bylaw, and as some of you may have seen, I came up with both a PowerPoint presentation. I think the PowerPoint presentation may have been copied twice, at least in the email to me. I put together a PowerPoint and also a PDF with draft changes to the bylaw. The bylaw is terrific. It does have a few inconsistencies and a few things that we could potentially change. And just as a very early starting point, based on what a lot of everyone else in the committee has said and based on our discussions, I kind of tried, and so I think a lot of you will see a lot of yourself in what I put in that PowerPoint. I tried to put together some suggested initial changes just as a way to start discussion. So obviously, just initial suggestions, and the PowerPoint is very much in draft form.
But before you totally go away, could I ask the question about your historical, your conversation with the citizens that took you back in history and up to the present?
Yep.
Were there any disconnects, or do you see where we are as a thread?
Oh yeah, very, very much a thread. And, perhaps there were even some things that some folks on the committee brought up that I wasn't as aware of as I could be. And so now I think I have, much better background and much better context, but nothing that's inconsistent with anything we've done, no revelations that, need to be shared. I mean, these are all things that if you've been paying attention to everything over the past 5 years, you'd have this information. I certainly wasn't on this issue, so it really was very helpful to me.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Claude, I wanted to explain to you how the PowerPoint is not going to be sent out to the general public because it's not something that other people want to put their names to yet.
Absolutely.
And so I took a crack at one piece of your PowerPoint that I thought was very helpful, which is the matrix that has all the different roles for town manager, town meeting, personnel board.
Yep.
And I'm going to circulate that and see. And so I'm going to sort of tease out parts of that and see if we have some agreement around some of those things first before we go beyond that.
No, agreed. Just, for open meeting law, I just wonder what the best way for us to do that, because my understanding is we can't do things like that outside of the meeting. So
True.
I'm not sure. More Ruth and Ann, you probably have a better idea how it works than I do. So what's the best way to do that?
Well, what I'm going to do is send it out as pre-work for the next meeting.
Perfect.
But I wanted to make sure I had the conversation with you first.
Oh no, I have a very thick skin, and this was pure, and I put draft on it in as big letters as I possibly could because it's just a starting point. And so yeah, so sending it out and then having the discussion at the next meeting, that sounds perfect.
Well, and it's only going to be that one or a couple of pages.
Yeah.
But we need to talk about the draft PDF as well. I learned differently maybe than other people, but I really needed to go over those several pages of your suggested changes and compare and contrast and whatnot. So I don't want to overlook that either.
Okay.
So-
What we might want to do is basically they're parallel documents.
Yeah,
So the PowerPoint in a way is easier to read because it's bullet point, style. And
That's why I started there.
right. And so whatever we decide on the PowerPoint will change the PDF. So if we decide the broad concepts on the PDF, on the PowerPoint, I'll then do another draft of the PDF and we can take it from there.
okay.
Great.
I'm the type of person, as I'm reading along and I look at a word and I wonder, is there a specific meaning here? When it says, when the personnel board, or whenever the personnel board, I get stopped right there trying to figure out, is there substantive difference or should we rewrite, that kind of thing. I will let that go just so you know, nitpicking is ahead. Thank you.
Okay.
Paul?
I haven't read it over, but I fully admit, the only thing, Claude, I would ask in anything that goes out that could be a part of the public record is that if I haven't had any input on it, could you not put my name on it?
Oh, okay.
Because
Sure.
someone from the outside, if they looked at just that, and again,
Cover page.
not the
Like a done
merits,
deal.
not the merits or demerits of the document. I don't know. I haven't really looked at it yet.
Okay.
But when we get there to start doing this, and if a PowerPoint presentation is the appropriate thing to do, if someone looks at that now, I'm afraid that they're going to say, well, that's what Paul McComb thinks. Or
Okay.
that's what Bruce
Yeah,
Button
I could
thinks, so
even,
that's what-
I
Or
could
that
even
we're
take
done.
I could even take the title of the task force up. I just wanted to share the really cool graphic, so I put that on there.
I like the old one. I like the North Bridge. That was good. I like that. And it was very colorful. I'll give you that. But I just would ask as a courtesy that
Sure.
I don't see any problem with distributing it if it says by Claude Cicchetti.
No.
That's-
I'll just take all the titles off. That's fine.
As long as
I
it
just like,
doesn't look,
I just like to request my name come off it too, because I saw it and I said, what's this? I don't know anything about
Well, it's a front page and it should come away. It's not part.
it. I understand. I'm just
Yeah.
telling you, the person you had there from the McCormick, whoever she was from UMass, she thought she had seen it. She thought it was a document we had all worked
But
on.
she got the same thing that you got on Friday.
Okay. I'm just saying, my name was on it. I don't like that.
Okay.
Susan?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, I think I heard this, that once that document goes out to the committee, the responses will only go to Claude. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
But
I'm confused. Are we not
Wait a
discussing
minute,
it at a
One of
meeting?
the things I want to clarify, I'm taking some things out of his report. And we're going to discuss them and agree on them as a task force now that he's drafted something.
I was just referring to, I'm
I'm
sorry.
not taking the whole document, no. Because it's a PowerPoint.
No,
Each
I
page
think
is a
it's
separate,
I think, Susan, it was a procedural question, and
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to do it. So Ann and Ruth, you tell me, if you send out whatever pages you want to everyone, should we wait to discuss it at the next meeting?
yes.
Is that, okay, that's fine. So
No.
nobody should email me. We'll just discuss it at the next
No.
meeting. Okay,
Once once the members of the committee receive it, that's their time to study it. So that when we discuss, we're speaking intelligently about something that we've had an opportunity to think about.
And it becomes product of the whole task force.
right.
Yes.
So Ann, you'll modify it as you wish and take out what you want. You'll send it to me. Or actually, you could then,
I
you
can
don't need
send
to
it out.
pass it through me. You send it out. Perfect. Perfect.
Paul?
I'm just procedurally, are we even, it seems like we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit we seem to be discussing aspects of what to change and what not to change, but I didn't feel like we're there yet.
No, we're not. That's the whole point. We're
yeah,
not, that's why we're not going to discuss it anymore tonight.
Okay, all right, but if we're going to discuss it at the next meeting after we study this document, would
It
you
will-
like to hear from
No,
me?
it will not be the whole document. It will not be the whole PowerPoint. It'll be 1 or 2 pages from it. That's all.
Okay,
Ooh, the cover letter of that's complicated. It's going to go along the lines of, dear committee, you've already received a document, 1 page of which we are going to discuss.
Here it is.
And the
And I'm going to send
discussion,
you a copy of that, only that page.
you're going to have to write some context on the top of that,
That's fine.
because
Well,
otherwise
I
that
will do
document is
that.
now,
I will do that. I will get it.
okay.
Yeah.
We'll struggle. Okay. Bruce's turn.
I just had my short turn.
Oh, I'm sorry. Paul's turn.
I thought I had a very good visit with, initially was with Alan for about 15 minutes, and then Alan brought in Aaron, too many A's. His number 2, the grounds supervisor. We spoke together for a while, and then I met with Aaron for quite some time. And there was, it really was an introductory discussion, I think. There were a lot of good points tossed around. I had submitted the questions to them beforehand so that they had some general idea of where we were going. There's a lot of experience there in working union and non-union ends of the spectrum. We didn't get to one of the specifics I wanted to drill down on, and we agreed that let's meet again. Is that addressing a union contract versus a year-to-year compensation type of thing? I think that's directly related to our what we likely would want to look at with the personnel board, and I'd like their input on that. Alan comes from a primarily non-union at water and sewer. Now he's in a hybrid, and Aaron came from Maynard, and that's entirely union, including administrative, right up through. So some great. I think it's a good landing spot for me to get more input, and we didn't really get there. We did get there on agreement that a employee handbook would be helpful. And we got there on a general agreement on a new topic of looking at a sick bank for employees as a Benny, something that maybe we, what can we do that maybe some other communities don't do, that might be a bonus, or an employee would think that, this is a pretty good thing for us to have. General discussion. And I think you see the rest of my responses that to those questions. That's where I'm at.
Excellent.
Great. Ruth?
I interviewed the select board, and I was very pleased. They were willing to give me all of the time that it took. We had nice in-depth discussions and went off the rails many times, which is, so it's just great to live in a town where people will speak to you instead of, talking heads. Anyway, I thought the information that they shared and their willingness to be paying attention to this was just terrific. I did not hear a unanimous, I don't have a word for it right now. I heard a range of opinions on topics that were basically the same in degrees of difference. I thought it was quite helpful to know. They were free to say that they're already undertaking some changes. They are meeting more with the leadership team. They are looking at the task force as a way of strengthening and clarifying. I can see us having ongoing discussions, not that I want the task force to go into the future in perpetuity, but there is room for continued conversation on all fronts. And they were open, I think, to an appreciation of what the challenges are for the town, for the task force, for employees. A good time was had by all.
Okay, thank you. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that we took the liberty of adding some dates for meetings. And you'll see them there. And if there's any ones that you're not going to be able to make, or you see a problem with a holiday, let me know. I think we've already got them on the books, but we can certainly, it's easier to drop once you've set them than not. And then the question I'm left with is, are we at a place where we can say what we're going to do next about the question of doing surveys versus several forums? I mean, there was a sense that forums would not afford the kind of anonymity that some felt was important to have. And I don't know where we are with that.
I will say that I continue to be happier with survey than focus group. I think at a focus group, we hear many of the things that Mary alluded to. People will want to play Ain't It Awful? And I can't say that it's awful, so I don't want to play Ain't It Awful? And I think if we are careful in identifying what our goal is in the survey and then crafting clear questions, then we can get some useful information, more so than multiple, because the focus groups would have to be in real time. We would have to have multiple focus groups, multiple people recording, multiple people doing the analysis. And I think it would be like one constant SAT essay question.
So am I hearing a sentiment of wanting to move forward with doing some form of a survey?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
No,
Who said
Who
no?
was the no? Claude was
I was the
no?
no. And,
Okay.
again, I'm not against the survey, but I think the sort of questions the sort of comments that we've been getting are comments that aren't really appropriate to our task. As helpful as it is to get constructive comments, what we're really after is the role of the personnel board and how the bylaw might be changed. And what we're not after is, how a particular policy is implemented, and again, nothing against the helpful discussions, but they're not necessarily discussions that are helping our mission. That's the mission of the town manager, the HR director, and the personnel board. If we could design questions that'll help us answer the charge that we have, I think that's great. But I really haven't seen those questions.
Well, we haven't drafted them yet.
Okay.
Paul,
I think we're at a point to take up the town manager, in my opinion, on her offer to partner. I think we're all pretty intelligent, bright people and can come up with a list of questions that relate to our narrow focus. And I feel the same way about Carrie LaFleur and her folks. And that having them in the same survey only is an economy of scale. And if she would like to, I told her that, I had great feedback from John Harrison procurement in the finance department regarding costs, and I don't think she was adverse to spending a little money on this. And I just think it's a good opportunity where they have their questions and we have ours, and we put them on the same survey. I find it hard to understand what the argument would be. We're not making up the town's questions, and they're not making up ours. And I think we can do it. And it does, I just don't think it's
No.
rocket.
Well, I'm just trying to think of what the next action step is, and I'm thinking that Ruth and I ought to communicate with Carrie LaFleur about our desire to want to do a survey. And I do think, apropos of what Mary was saying, we need to think what specifically is the goal that we have
Right.
for the kind of information we want.
I agree completely.
So how would you characterize it?
I'm ready to make a motion that we work with Carrie LaFleur to develop a survey with her questions and with our questions. And how we go about doing that, it can be in process, and we can decide together. I mean, I just don't think it's going to be a huge process problem. You have your questions, we have our questions, and we put them on the same survey, and we put them up.
Right.
That's,
I would move approval so that we can get to the discussion.
Okay,
And
discussion.
that is, I agree with Paul's motion that we need to get started. We're going to work with the town manager. The town manager is going to put up some questions. We need to do the same. And here we are, 5 people. We have to come up with something, put it together, discuss it before we can be part of. So I would think by our next meeting, each of us has to pony up a question or 6 with a goal in mind. If Claude's point of view that we're looking for the role of the personnel board, not about policy, then there are questions inherent in that. How, having to do with the employee's relationship with the personnel board, if any, employees' relationship with town policies, town meeting, yes. So we need, I'm not going to be silly and submit a question that says, do you like how you're being paid? That's not what the nature of our work is. We need to ask questions about working in Concord. This is off the top of my head, so it wouldn't be, nice and solid. Do you see yourself working in the town of Concord in the next 5 years? Do you have a career path within Concord? Can you progress in your job in the town of Concord? There are much better ways of saying these things, but I need to know if the people that we are talking to and about, whether that is department heads or elected officials or the people holding the shovels or the
Wires.
keypads, have an understanding of what our goals are as a town. If we're all over the place, then we have other work to do.
And so to keep from being all over the place, we
Yes.
need to be clear on what the goal is.
And for that, I have a question. The goal of the survey or the goal of the task force recommendation?
The survey,
Okay.
which better feed into the other.
Yeah, one comes, as Claude keeps saying, cart before the horse, I think. No, maybe it wasn't Claude, maybe it was Bruce. You know, we want to get all of this done, but we have to find the right order to do it so that we get the information that we're looking for. We're not looking for information and we'll only hear specific answers. That's not what I mean. We're open to hearing all points of view.
So
Paul,
Ruth, to the minutes,
wait,
I
wait,
want to be clear, you've suggested we each come up with some questions for the next time, for the next meeting?
Yes,
Yes,
That was my
Thank you.
point.
And we've now discussed it, and is discussion done? And are you ready to vote on whether to do a survey?
Second,
It's already been seconded, it's
Oh.
been discussed, and
Aye.
now it's a vote.
Could we, I didn't know the discussion was over. If we don't know our questions, how can we vote? Could we,
Oh,
could we
come on.
postpone?
Come
What's that?
on, get on board.
Aye, that's fine, fine.
All right,
It's
I
unanimous.
know that
It's
it is
unanimous.
unanimous. Okay,
golly,
so everybody has some homework to do.
yes.
Okay.
And can you, just to clarify, we're going
Yes.
to reveal that homework at the next meeting, or are we going to send it ahead so it can be in the packet?
I think it'd be good if they were in the packet so we can.
I do too,
finalize.
because I like to think about things on the page.
Yeah.
All right, so Thursday is posting day.
And what's the date?
Oh my
It
gosh.
would be February something.
20, no.
we're still in January, I hope.
What is it?
February
Okay.
14th is the next meeting. No, January
No,
31st. is the next
31st, which means
27th.
the 27th would be
Ah,
the
okay.
posting date. Is that too soon?
No, that's fine.
No, I mean, if we don't
Okay,
throw in 3 or 4 questions, I bet
Yes.
we'll get
Yeah,
a good block of where we're
yes.
at.
And we should send them to who? To you, Ruth?
to me,
And
Ruth and Ann, okay.
before, they have to be in my hands before Thursday noon.
Ouch.
these are gonna be treated as rough drafts.
Yes.
These are not finalized.
I think you can get close to a sentence, but you don't have to have a sentence, right?
Yeah.
You could just list the topics that you think you need to cover. But sentences are better. And whether you think it's yes, no, or multiple choice. So we're open to
Okay.
designing this. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Paul,
I'm sorry, one last thing I failed to mention was in my discussion with Carrie, I don't know who, but she said she has a couple of people, I believe, on staff that have had experience with surveys. And she seemed open to, providing someone, because I have absolutely no experience with surveys. So if she has someone that does, however, if it's Ruth and Ann that go to talk to her about it, I just wanted to throw that in there that she had mentioned.
Good.
That she had somebody.
Bruce?
I talked with her also. She came over one day to chat, and my understanding is she's trying to hire someone that would also be able to help us, I think. And I believe, same thing Paul says, I think the person has some ideas on surveys and stuff. So,
Great.
and she's
Perfect.
200% behind doing a joint one.
Great.
Excellent.
Win-win.
I
Now,
love it when a plan comes together.
all
A
right,
second
I'm
ago,
gonna
we were
open it up
looking at
to the,
pending dates.
Huh?
I'm sorry, Ann. A
Go
second
ahead.
ago, we were looking at pending dates. Are we looking for confirmation or are we assuming everyone can make it?
I'm assuming everybody can make it unless they scream now.
Okay, not a scream, but it is Valentine's Day, February
I
14th.
know.
Could we do it earlier, the week earlier?
That would be meeting 3 weeks in a row. Right now, we're
Oh.
meeting 2 weeks in a row.
Okay,
We might need some hydration to do that.
Either that or we can let the 14th go. You want
I'm
to,
open to whatever you plan.
I put it on there.
Well,
I figured it was early enough in the afternoon and we could just say it's gonna be a short meeting.
It's still, for me, it'll be tricky.
Okay,
You want to do 3 o'clock?
Yeah,
I
No.
teach until 3:30, but yeah.
Okay.
are you still in your office?
No. Today was the first day, so it was somewhat shorter class. I escaped
okay.
at 3 o'clock and got home.
Yeah,
well, it looks as if the 14th is not viable.
let's strike it.
Okay,
We'll give ourselves a Valentine.
That's not supposed to happen. Come on.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
Okay.
yeah,
I do want to acknowledge that we have guests in the room,
What,
and if they want to make any comments, this would be the time to do so. Bruce, did you have your hand up?
yeah, I was just gonna say, how about if we move the one on the 31st to the 7th? That way we wouldn't be 3 weeks between them or something. I don't know, just a thought.
So have February 7th instead of January 31st?
That also gives us more time for the questions.
Yeah.
Good
Okay,
idea.
so are we've dropped
Striking?
the 14th.
we're staying with the 14th then.
No.
No.
No,
No,
No.
we're striking.
We'll move the 14th to the 7th.
Okay,
Oh, are we staying with the 31st as well? Or
no,
no?
we're striking
no,
the
okay.
31st.
31st is out. Okay.
And February 14th is out and it becomes February 7th.
Okay, so the dates I have for the minutes, February 7th, 28th, March 14th, March 28th.
Correct,
Okay.
great.
thank you. That helps. Okay,
Anybody
back
wanna
to the
make any
public.
Comments from the peanut gallery.
I don't see any hands up.
I don't either. Therefore, I declare that we are finished for this evening and I vote that we adjourn. Ruth, raise your hand.
Sorry.
She's busy.
All right, see you in 2 weeks.
It's 5:12.
Yeah,
Okay. Thanks, folks. Oh, Paul, before you go,
yeah.
no, Paul, Aaron's last name for the minutes.
Oh, I can't pronounce it. Let me get the spelling for it. McClosko, Miklosko.
And Alan, is that Cathcart?
Yes,
Yeah, okay. And the official name of that division?
Alan is the Director of Concord Public Works,
Director of
And
Public Works. Perfect.
and Aaron is the Highway and Grounds Superintendent.
Perfect. Thanks very much for that.
Great. See you all.
Good work, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.